As Joel from the Strength and Motion Academy here, and I would love to share with you today this special webinar on programming basics. So don't be scared, it's not going to be like algebra back in high school. It's not that complicated, but once you go through this seminar, this webinar, by the end, you're going to know how to create a basic program that's going to let you get to your fitness goals, whatever they may be. So hold on, listen tight, because after you've gone through this presentation, you'll know how to get your fitness goals. So here's a guy rubbing some sweat off his forehead. And I want to stress to you guys that programming matters because many of us bust our guts in the gym. We put a lot of time in, we put a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of willpower. And unfortunately, we don't get to our goals. So if you have a program, it's going to guarantee that you don't make the same mistake this guy has. He's sweated and he hasn't gotten his result. We want to use the program to get to where we want to be. So we don't want to be that person who's screwing up and wasting effort and energy, not doing what's correct. We want to do what's right to become that fit person and that healthy person that we want to be. So I love to use this analogy of a cake or cooking a recipe. If you are just trying to randomly wing cooking a recipe, you may be in for disaster. And unfortunately, a lot of people have really good intentions of coming to the gym and getting fit, but they don't realize it's a science and they wing it. And what happens for many people is they end up like the cake on the left. Their body ends up as a bit of a disaster, or they burn out and don't get the results that they want. So make sure, much like having a recipe to cook a delicious cake, you want a plan to create a delicious body. So I'm going to go over the 5 major principles that are required to create your program to get you to where you want to be. And the first principle is having a clear and defined goal. If you don't know what your goal is, how do you expect to know the steps to take to get to the goal? And the reason I say you want a clear and defined goal is because if you want too many things at once, it's going to make it hard to know the exact steps. So choose one goal and stick to that. So some examples of these goals, and I like to call these the what of your goal, are wanting to lose fat, wanting to build muscle, wanting to get better as an athlete, so for your sport or just outside of the gym in general, or trying to improve your posture and pain reduction. So these are the whats. And the thing to go with your what is your why. Your why is the emotional driver behind your goal. Because if you don't have a why, you're not going to commit. And if you can't commit, you're not going to be able to put the work in to get your result. So make sure you have a clear goal, whatever that is, and why you're doing that goal. So the next thing is the exercise selection. So if we go back to thinking about a recipe, your exercises are a bit like your ingredients. And you could have the best ingredients ever, but if you combine them in the wrong quantities and the wrong amounts, you're still not going to create a great cake or a delicious body. So let's go over my 3 rules for exercise selection. So the first rule, rule number 1, is called big before little. And in the gym, there are some exercises that work more muscle groups, and we call those big exercises, and they are compound exercises. So compound exercises use multiple muscle groups or multiple joints, and they're exercises that typically get us more results in a shorter period of time because they burn more energy. So I don't want to go too much into this because we will have a document that is going to explain this later and help you guys understand what exercises are what. But a good example of that, if we're talking about leg training, is a squat is going to give you more results, and therefore you would program it in before doing something like a calf raise. This also means in the context of a training day, you would do your big exercises before your little exercises. So not only do you want to have more of these compound exercises within your training routine so it's more effective, within the course of a day, you want to do these big exercises first when you're fresh and when you have energy for these exercises. Rule number 2 is to understand that you need to train your whole body. Because if you train your whole body, it means you're not missing any muscle groups, which means you're going to have a well-developed and strong physique. So we can break this down into a few different patterns. And if we look at the upper body, we can do upper body pressing motions and upper body pulling motions. An example of an upper body pushing motion is a push-up, and an example of an upper body pulling motion is a chin-up. If we're looking at the lower body, we have the posterior chain and quad dominant movements. So a lower body posterior chain movement would be Romanian deadlift, and that trains the back of your legs, so your hamstrings and your butt. And if we're looking at squat, that trains the front of your legs. And on that note, rule number 3 is you want to make sure you balance your exercises. So for example, with our upper body, if we had to do a pressing exercise such as a bench press, we want to balance that with a pulling exercise such as a cable row. And the same applies to something that trains the front of our legs such as a squat. to balance it with something that trains the back of our legs, such as a hamstring curl. And even if we think around one joint, like the elbow joint, if you're doing a lot of bicep curls, you want to make sure you do some tricep exercises too. So now let's look at parameters. So if the exercises are the ingredients, the parameters are a bit like setting the temperature in the oven and the cooking time in the oven. You also want to get these things right so you get the most out of your ingredients. So when we're talking about parameters, the first is how many reps that you do. And this is a general rule, but based off your goal that you established earlier, here are some rep ranges that I suggest you do most of your work in. So if your number one goal is muscle building, and by toning I also mean fat loss, then I would suggest that you do most of your exercises in an 8 to 12 rep range. And that means that you choose a weight that will be challenging for around 8 to 12 reps. And again, our second parameter is rest period. So this is based off your initial goal. And you can see when we want to train for strength, we rest longer. When we're trying to train for strength and muscle building, we rest about 2 to 3 minutes between each set. If we're looking at muscle building, fat loss, and toning, we're looking at 60 seconds between sets. But for pure fat loss, you're aiming for density. And what is density, you may ask? Density is how much work can you complete in the smallest amount of time without compromising form or even reducing the load too much. So say, for example, I'm doing 2 exercises. I can rest as little amount as possible between those 2 exercises that doesn't detract away from how well I do those 2 exercises. So if you need to rest a little bit longer to make sure you do them well, go for that. But if you can go hard and keep that density high, then I'd go for that as well. Now, our third parameter, should say number 3 there, is tempo. So for most people, I would focus on looking at the muscle building and toning tempo, and that's about 3 seconds up. 3 seconds down on your rep and 1 second up. And that's going to make sure you spend enough time on each rep to execute those reps correctly and do it with a sufficient amount of time to actually stress the muscle out. If you rush a rep, you're not working as hard as you could be. You may see at the top for maximum strength athletes, they want to do explosive reps. So based on your goal, there is a different rep speed required. And remember, for each individual goal, we will have these parameters at the end of our document for you guys to look at. So the fourth thing to look at when you're designing a really good training program is progression. If you're not going forward in the gym and if you're not measurably doing that, how do you know you're getting towards that number one goal we talked about earlier? So the biggest way to make sure you're progressing is to focus on these few things I'm highlighting here. So if we're doing an exercise, one way to make that exercise harder is by adding load. And that would mean just a small amount of load each workout to guarantee that you're getting better than the workout before. And this does mean I suggest writing down how you've done in each workout so you know to get a little bit better each session. The second thing you can do is increase reps. But remember, you don't want to increase the reps beyond the target rep range for your goal. So say you came in and you can only do 8 reps of an exercise and the next session you do 10 or 12, that's fine because you've increased the reps, but you've still done that within your desired rep range. If you increase the reps too much, you're actually going to change how that exercise stimulates your body. So be careful with that one. The next thing you can do is choose a harder exercise variation. And we're going to have a document covering this at the end of this webinar, but there are variations that are harder than others and easier than others. And you need to make sure you're choosing the one that's right for you. The third or fourth thing we can do is increase work volume. And that is the total amount of exercises, reps, and sets you're doing within a session. So at first, when you get to the gym, you don't need to do a ridiculous amount of work to get a result because anything you do is an improvement on what you've been doing before. But as you train more and your body adapts, you need to start working a little bit longer and doing a little bit more work so your body continually has to adapt and change to what you're doing. And the last thing I'd suggest if you're trying to lose fat or even just burn more energy is increasing work density. And work density is doing more work in less time. So a lot of us don't have time to waste. So we need to learn how to get a little bit more volume in the same amount of time, okay? The last thing that a lot of people forget about, and this is super important because we do lead very busy and stressed lives, is recovery. Most people think muscle building and fat loss happens in the gym, but it's when our body's outside of the gym and recovering where all of these adaptations actually occur. So this means you need to not neglect foam rolling, and foam rolling is just when you get tension out of your body. Same goes for stretching. If you do have the liberty to go and get a massage, I'd recommend that as well. And it also means that you understand when it's necessary to have rest days so that if you feel stressed, if you've had a bad sleep, if you just feel pretty stiff and sore, it's okay to rest because that's when your body's going to recover. And last but not least, we also think you should do something called a deload week. So say you've been training hard for 6 weeks and you get into the gym and you're starting to feel a little bit burnt out. We actually recommend having an entire week where you go a little bit lighter or do a little less overall work, such that your body can recover from all that fatigue that it's accumulated over the weeks prior. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed the presentation, but the big next step from here is not just to feel good about learning something, it's to take all of this information and go make a program for it so you can go after your goals. So underneath this video, there will be a PDF with a bit of a cheat sheet on exactly how to take what we've just told you in this presentation and make your own program, plus a couple of sample workouts. So now there's nothing stopping you from getting you what you want in the gym. Jump on the PDF below, have a little read of our cheat sheet, and take all this information, make yourself a workout, and go smash it, guys. All the best. I wish you all the best, and I hope you do really well. Thank you.